Hello and welcome back. Okay, so I thought that today we can discuss this female scientist and writer called Miss Rachel Louise Carson. But we're just going to say Rachel Carson, right? Rachel Carson. Born in the state of Pennsylvania, and she was a scientist and a writer, a very caring scientist. She noticed by carefully observing how certain pesticides were poisoning nature, our animals and flowers, such as the pesticide called DDT. That's right, yes, DDT. DDT. Consonants, 3 consonants, DDT. And it's obviously an abbreviation for a very long scientific word. Remember DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid? It's longer than that. So DDT pesticide was really affecting certain animals such as worms, and birds would eat worms because the worms would get this pesticide from the soil, get access to it from the soil. And then if a beautiful songbird such as the robin would eat the worm, now the robin is affected, contaminated. And then if the hawk eats that little bird, the hawk is contaminated because that little bird ate the worm. So it started to affect food chains, right? And Miss Rachel Carson noted this down. She even published a book called Silent Spring in 1962. Needless to say, laws were passed forbidding this DDT pesticide from being sprayed on grass, trees, and in the air. Alright, so let's remember Miss Rachel Carson from Pennsylvania. There is a bridge in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania named after her. Rachel Carson, a scientist, a writer. Rachel Carson published her book in 1962. A Silent Spring, a Silent Spring. That's the name of her book. Rachel Carson, a scientist, a writer. Rachel Carson, a scientist, a writer. Rachel Carson. Rachel Carson, a scientist, a writer. Rachel Carson published her book in 1962. A Silent Spring, a Silent Spring. Rachel Carson, a scientist, a writer. Rachel Carson, a scientist, a writer. Rachel Carson. Rachel Carson, born in Pennsylvania. Rachel Carson, a scientist, a writer. Rachel Carson wrote her book, published her book in 1962. Rachel Carson published her book in 1962. So Miss Rachel Carson published her book, A Silent Spring, where she explains how these pesticides have to be banned, right? They need to be more observed before they just go and start spraying these pesticides in the air. Same year, 1962, that John Glenn from Ohio, the astronaut John Glenn, goes to space. Same year. Yeah, so 1962 was quite a scientific year, right? John Glenn from Ohio goes to space, and Miss Rachel Carson, a scientist, a writer. Rachel Carson published her book entitled A Silent Spring in 1962. Let's remember Miss Rachel Carson. See you next time.